So here are some of these. They say that these are the 6 foundational moral assumptions of critical race theory. So first is that racism against colored people is endemic to Eurocentric societies. And so by colored people, they're not just talking about black people. They're talking about anyone who's not white. So now the word colored means anyone who's not white, even though 1924, when we had the Racial Integrity Act in America, where it was, intermarriage between whites and non-whites was outlawed, right, in 1924, that those who were colored in that particular law were a reference to Blacks and Native Americans, or any person who has an admixture of all 3 or at least two of those particular races, right? Those were considered the colored people. But now this new sort of movement has arisen related to critical race theory, where it's a binary between whites and non-whites, right? So again, coming back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, is that Shaitan he's okay with you serving him with respect to sowing discord between people. Right? How can you sort of judge a person by the content of their color, right? As opposed to by their color, as opposed to the content of their character, right? So that's what Islam is supposed to be about, But it's like automatically, if you're a white person, then you are, that you are a racist, and you're irredeemably racist. In other words, you can't help but to be racist if you're white. This is what it teaches, right? So but racism is endemic to your Eurocentric societies. In other words, all your Eurocentric societies are endemically racist. Secondly, white over colored ascendancy serves important purposes, psychic and material. And again, there's truth in some of these things that they say, right? So in other words, like when people talk about white privilege, I'm often like really frustrated quite often, because I feel that the whites who say that they don't have white privilege, they don't understand, or rather, put it like this, word it a different way. When people say that a white person has white privilege, they mean it in a lot of different ways. They mean that they have sort of a psychological privilege, you have economic privilege, that you have political privilege, etc. Right? And in some particular in some context, that is the truth. With a lot of white people, that is the case, right? But there are a lot of whites, like for instance, many times the Irish, if you tell the Irish person, okay, well, you have white privilege, most of the time they say, what are you talking about? I don't have any white privilege. I have to fight just like everybody else, right? Because in America, for instance, the Irish were persecuted at one time. The Italians were persecuted at one time as well. The Jews were persecuted, and even in America during the 20th century, even. But privilege, to me, I believe there is white privilege, but it's much more of what we can call a social privilege, which pertains to a psychological state of inferiority that non-whites have. Right? In other words, I'll give you an example of this. I moved to the Bay Area back in 2007, and there were certain messages I was doing the Jummah khutbah at for a very long time. And they would post the videos of those khutbah of certain people, not everybody, but certain people. They would post their khutbahs. Now I've been doing khutbah for multiple years, and not even one of my khutbahs had been posted up to that point. Amazing. And so there was one white brother who had a new convert to Islam, he moved to the Bay Area, who actually was a student of mine. And so eventually he was invited to the same masajid to do khutbah, and right after he gave khutbah, they posted his videos. Right? Amazing. And so of course I raised an issue with it. I was like, well, why is it that you're posting his videos and not mine, right? So I'm thinking, what was it about him that made his khutbah so special, right? And only reason I can think it was that, okay, well, there was an inferiority complex, or rather they placed more value on whiteness than on blackness, or something along those lines, right? So a lot of white people don't realize, okay, well, that is the sort of way that a lot of non-whites, they interact with them. A lot of blacks, for instance, if you interact with a white person, say for instance, you go into a store, a lot of black folks, and I catch myself doing this as well from time to time, even still today, is that if I see a white person working in the store and I need something, I'll actually start to speak more formally. And I'll say, excuse me, sir,
Oh, really?
But if it's a black person, I'll say, hey, excuse me, how, where I have there's a different sort of way that I approach the individual. But again, that's something within me, right? And I would say I've been conditioned that way, right? And I think a lot of white people don't understand that, that this is this is part of the privilege. To me, I think this is the most harmful aspect of what we call white privilege that does exist. But I do think it's completely legitimate when an Irishman says, what do you mean I don't have privilege? I'm poor, just like you, right? That's like, no, true.
I think, for a long time, I didn't buy into this white privilege idea. I thought it was just a load of left-wing rubbish, to be honest, until I started to travel a lot, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years with blogging theology work. And I've been traveling, obviously, but by air mostly, with people, with friends, colleagues, who are not white, and to see the difference in the way people are treated, and to hear the stories from colleagues and friends who say Arab background and so on, was absolutely extraordinary. And I heard the stories so often from different people who I know and trust and rely on, academics, some of them. And I could see for myself how people are differently treated at passport control, immigration, and so on. And it's consistent and almost universal, and a genuinely eye-opener for me. Before, I'd never noticed. Well, I hadn't been traveling like that before. So now I know it's real from my experience, and I expect it to be the case. I mean, you mentioned the Bay Area. When I went to the States last year to Zaytuna, as you know. The long queue at San Francisco airport, waiting to go through passport control. And the guy in front of me, I knew what the questions were going to be. 3 questions, like purpose of visit, how long are you going to be here, whatever. And so I knew I could answer those questions in about 20 seconds. And I saw the people who took a long time and the people who went through like lightning. And it took me probably about 10 seconds to go through passport control. Whoosh, it was like, and that's not what happened to other people. You could see what was going on, the way people were treated differently. And I expected it, and it's what I saw, and it was really an eye-opener, and that's typical, unfortunately. So white privilege certainly exists, and a lot of white people don't know this, they don't see it, they don't believe it, but it's real. And this is without any kind of theory or looking at any kind of academic studies. It's purely anecdotal from my experience, but I've certainly seen it, and I hear it from friends and colleagues. They tell me these extraordinary stories, and they're all the same over and over and over. White privilege exists. And it's not just white people that do it. You find it in many some certain Muslim countries, very famous Muslim countries, that actively do it as well. And so this kind of racism is internalized and perpetuated.
Yes, right. I was
racist, but they are. I mean, so they treat whites differently from Arabs and so on. Even Arabs do it themselves. And this was like, you've got to be kidding, but they do it, and I've seen it.
Right. Yeah, I remember I interviewed for a job in the Gulf area some years ago. Before I came to Zaytuna, I was applying for a job over there, and the guy who interviewed me, he's a Muslim guy, and he told me point blank. He said, "Listen, you're unlikely to get this job because of your name."
Wow.
He said that I've noticed that they prefer people with European names.
Wow.
Right, to actually come, work here, so you do have a big problem, but again, there's not a whole lot that white people can do about that. Right? You understand, right? that this is something that has to change within us. And again, this is part of like Dr. Jackson's project too, right? I would say is that, you have to, something within you has to change where you treat everyone the same based upon their character, not based upon their color. Right. So, again, it just mean, at least my understanding of Dr. Jackson's project, right? But again, thirdly, races are social constructs, not biological facts, right? So this is, again, at least a claim that critical race theorists make. Number 4, differential racialization. In other words, as stated here, the calculated alteration of discriminatory policies between one racial minority to another, depending upon time and circumstance, happens in response to shifting needs in the labor market, right? So in other words, economic problem, we having all these Mexicans come in. Oh man, that's a threat, right? We have to demonize the Mexicans, right? Or it can be the same thing when it was the Italians, or the same thing when it was the Irish, the same, So in other words, So in other words, there's some truth to these patterns, right? Then we have what is called intersectionality and anti-essentialism, right? So a person is more than just a single characteristic, right? You're not only your race, you can be characterized on the basis of your sexual orientation, your political affiliation, etc. So all those sort of different, there can be different layers to your oppression. You can be a woman plus a lesbian plus a black person, right? So you're oppressed as a woman, also as a black woman, and also as a lesbian woman, so you get default oppressed status. And then you can be a Muslim as well, Muslim woman as well, right? Being a woman by yourself is one thing, but you can be a black woman plus a black Muslim woman. Now you have the double whammy, right? Or triple whammy there, which is that, you're oppressed as a woman, you're oppressed as a Muslim, and you're also oppressed as a black person, right? So intersectionality is what's meant by that. But then also what they call anti-essentialism, which is fundamentally the idea that one should not judge all the individuals or the members of a race or assume that each of them all are uniform or all the same. Right.
But doesn't that contradict what you said earlier on when you were characterizing CRT as essentialist when it comes to white people? So white people are irredeemable.
Yes.
They can't help themselves. So, but it's okay to have this anti-essentialism attitude towards one group, but not towards white groups. It doesn't seem to be
right. So white people are all the same, but no one else is. Right.
Exactly.
So only white people are all the same. Right. But they don't say that. We don't say that expressly, So this is so in my particular article where I actually challenge these ideas, that's one of the things I pointed out. And so some people there say, oh, he doesn't understand critical race theory. I said, well, if I don't, then okay, help me understand, because that's what it looks like to me, that basically you're saying that the only group of people who can be racist are white people. Right. And they actually do say that because they said that you have to have power in order for you to be racist, right? So I can actually call you all types of names. I can call you racial slurs, but it's not racist because I'm not white, right? I can call you. I can say I'm not going to say those things, but I in the article I gave some examples of what I was talking about. Is that I can say all these things about a white person, but I can't be racist. Why? Because I'm not white, and by virtue of not being white, I have no power. Because the only way you can be racist is you have to have power.
But non-whites can have power, as I mentioned already. Say at passport control, at immigration, over other non-whites, and treat them in a racially negative way. I've seen it. So non-whites do have power over each other, so to speak, in these contexts.
But it's not real power. It's not real power, but white people have all the real power. You have borrowed power. That power has been borrowed. Your power is vicarious, right? It's given to you by white people, right?
Can't win this argument.
Right, yeah. And then finally, the unique voice of color thesis, which posits that every group, due to their experience with the white supremacist order, has developed a unique standpoint for explaining one's socio-political and economic status. That standpoint is considered superior to that of whites, who are presumed to generally lack the capacity to see the privilege with which they live. So, in other words, again, this is my unique voice standpoint theory. You can find this in feminism too. Standpoint theory. The oppressed have a broader lens to understand the relationship between him or herself and the oppressor than the oppressor actually does. So. Again, there may be some value in some of these things, but it's deconstructive, but it's not good at reconstruction, right? Right. Which brings us to, again, so that issue, like I said, I wanted to highlight that because I think that this is one of the things that complicates Muslims' mandate to actually heal the world, help the world to heal, right? That there's people who believe, people have expressed that Islam actually has the power to solve the race problem. But again, come back, what is race? Is it a biological fact or is it a social construct? We say, okay, race is a combination. It's not simply a social construct because clearly some people share the same color, same hair texture. They share the same DNA, right? From mother and father, from, tribe, whatever, things like that, right? It all depends on how you define a race, right? But it's not completely biological, right? To the extent that one would assume that because of one's biology, that certain behavioral characteristics would result from your color. Now, of course, we have the monogenetic theory, which is more predominant theory. You know, we all believe that we come from Adam and Hawa, alayhim assalam, Adam and Eve. And this is something that even in the scientific realm appears to be predominant, that human beings, you know, go back to a single progenitor or go back to a single-celled organism. And then sort of that organism is, you know, talk about evolutionary theory, and sort of it expands and multiplies, and then eventually we all became what we are today. And then there are all others like Voltaire and similar people who believes in the polygenetic theory, that human beings do not originate from a single progenitor. But most people, as Muslims, we have to believe in the first one. We believe that Adam is the father of humanity and Hawa is the mother of humanity, and that all of us originated from them. And of course, there were mutations that happened over the centuries, the millennia, and we are what we are today. And it is part of the test that we all live with today.
But by the way, the Quran does say that these different groups are actually willed by God and a blessing from God. They're actually not some kind of just freak of nature. I mean, that these are actually willed by our Creator.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You know, that we made you from a male and from a female, and we may place you, into to peoples and into tribes in order for you to come to know one another. But in akramakum indallah itqakum, and the most honorable, noble among you are the one who is most conscientious of God, right? Most conscious of God among you, right? So that is the Quranic teaching, right? That we believe that we originate from a single progenitor, even if, of course, some people today have attempted to try to question or to disturb that understanding, which had been spread as the orthodox understanding and belief from the early centuries of Islam, right? So this one scholar, Matthew Fry Jacobson, he said of race that it is both a conception and a perception. Now, the perception to me is a more important aspect here, in that although we've moved beyond what we call sort of blatant institutional racism in Western societies, we still live with the perceptions that were injected into our minds, which go back centuries. Right? So in other words, I personally believe that as long as Westerners don't return or sort of rehash these old arguments and refute them, then race itself is going to be a source of is going to be an Achilles heel for the West, right? And I believe that this is the fundamental reason why we still are living in such a period of crisis, because it looked like after the election of Barack Obama as president, that people were saying, okay, now America is post-racial. Yeah. Now anything's possible. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump becomes president, and then now America becomes the most racist place on the planet again. You know, is that racism has never gone away, right? So, and it's really interesting that how that sort of change, that sort of shift, it so quickly happened. You know, I grew up, you grew up, you know, we saw like multiple shows on television that actually were dealing with the race problem. Like, you know, I don't know, you probably remember All in the Family. There's Archie Bunker. There was the Jeffersons. There were, I mean, I don't know if you watch these programs, you know, but there were these, a lot of
the American shows. So
yeah, but a lot of the American shows, right? Yeah. A lot of the American shows were actually normalizing race relations, right? But in a very funny way, while they actually have racist characters in those shows. And so people were becoming accustomed to actually interacting with the opposite race and even, you know, making fun of it, right? So, but then all of a sudden things change. So now we find this very fragile people, unfortunately now, you know, where, you know, like a lot of the negative ideas that existed about blacks and the more positive things about whites, we still live with those things, right? So